Ethan Cross adjusted the controls of his small exploration ship as it drifted toward asteroid Theta 72, a forgotten rock floating at the edge of human-explored space. It wasn't much to look at. Just another dead chunk of metal and dust, once mined by corporations before they abandoned it decades ago. But to Ethan, it held potential. If there was even a chance of finding valuable scrap, old tech, or rare minerals, it was worth checking out. His scanner beeped softly, confirming what he already suspected. No signs of life, just the cold, silent remnants of an old mining operation. Ethan sighed and leaned back in his seat. "All right, let's see what you've got." His ship touched down gently on the asteroid's surface, kicking up a small cloud of dust. Grabbing his helmet and gear, Ethan stepped out into the low gravity, his boots making soft thuds against the rocky terrain. The entrance to the mine wasn't far, a gaping black hole leading into the unknown. "Creepy," he muttered to himself, activating his helmet light. "But I've seen worse." With cautious steps, he moved inside. The walls of the mine were lined with rusted machinery and long-dead consoles, their screens cracked and dark. The place had clearly been abandoned in a hurry. Old mining drones lay scattered like forgotten toys, and deep claw marks ran along some of the walls. Probably from collapsed rock, or maybe something else. Ethan's gut told him something was off. He'd explored plenty of old facilities before, but this one felt different. He shook off the feeling and continued deeper. Then his scanner pinged. A faint energy signature buried beneath layers of rock. Ethan frowned. There shouldn't be anything active in a place like this. The mine's power systems were long dead, and any remaining energy sources should have faded years ago. But this signal, it was steady, strong, almost as if someone had kept it running. Curiosity burned in his chest. Carefully, he followed the signal, stepping over fallen debris and ducking under broken support beams. The further he went, the stronger the energy reading became. After several minutes, he reached a sealed door. Unlike everything else in the mine, this door wasn't rusted or broken. It looked pristine, its surface smooth and humming with hidden power. Ethan whistled. Well, that's not normal. He ran his fingers along the edges, feeling the faint vibration of energy beneath the metal. There was no obvious way to open it, no keypad, no handle, just a single glowing symbol at the center, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. Ethan hesitated. His instincts told him to be careful, but his curiosity was stronger. He reached out and pressed his gloved hand against the symbol. The reaction was instant. The door shuddered, a low hum filling the air as ancient mechanisms whirred to life. Dust rained down from the ceiling as hidden gears turned. Then, with a deep hiss, the door slid open. A rush of cold air hit Ethan's face as dim, bluish light flickered on inside. He stepped forward, heart pounding. Inside the chamber, his breath caught in his throat. A stasis pod stood at the center of the room, its glass surface slightly frosted over. And inside, a woman. She wasn't human. Her skin had a soft, iridescent glow, shifting between shades of silver and deep blue. Delicate patterns ran along her arms and forehead, like natural tattoos made of starlight. Her hair, long and weightless in the zero gravity, floated around her face like silk. And yet, despite her alien features, she looked peaceful, almost tragic. But what caught Ethan's attention the most were the restraints. Thin, glowing bands wrapped around her wrists, ankles, and torso, pulsing with the same energy as the door symbol. They weren't just holding her in place. They were keeping her trapped. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Who was she? Why was she here? And who had done this to her? His fingers hovered over the pod's control panel. The interface was unlike anything he had seen before, but he could make out some of the symbols. Containment protocols, stasis integrity, energy barriers. This wasn't just a sleep chamber. It was a prison. A prison that had been forgotten in this empty mine. Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind racing. There were 1,000 reasons why he shouldn't interfere. If she had been locked away, there had to be a reason. But another part of him, the same part that had always pushed him toward adventure, toward uncovering the unknown, told him that no one deserved to be left like this. He clenched his jaw. Well, guess I'm making bad decisions today. With a deep breath, he reached out and deactivated the restraints. As soon as he did, the glowing bands flickered, then vanished. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the pod hissed open. The alien woman gasped, her eyes snapping open, glowing with a soft silver light. She collapsed forward, straight into Ethan's arms. His mind barely had time to register the warmth of her skin before her lips parted, and she whispered something in a language he didn't understand. And then, everything went dark. Ethan's world spun into darkness. A strange, weightless feeling wrapped around him, like floating in deep water. Then suddenly, light burst into his mind. Flashes of stars, distant planets, and an alien city covered in silver towers. A voice whispered through the images, unfamiliar yet filled with urgency. Then, with a sharp gasp, Ethan's senses snapped back. He was on the cold metal floor of the chamber, his head pounding. His helmet display flickered, struggling to adjust to the sudden energy surge. His arms felt weak, and his breathing was ragged, but he was alive. And so was she. The alien woman lay beside him, her chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. The stasis pod behind her was completely powered down, its glow fading into nothingness. Whatever technology had kept her trapped for so long, it was gone. Ethan pushed himself up slowly, his muscles stiff. "All right," he muttered, rubbing his temple. That was definitely not normal. The woman stirred. Her fingers twitched and her eyelids fluttered open, revealing silver eyes that shimmered like liquid metal. Ethan froze. For a moment, she simply stared at him, her gaze unreadable. Then, with surprising grace, she pushed herself up, sitting on her knees. She looked around the chamber, her expression shifting from confusion to realization, then to something darker. Fear. Ethan recognized the look immediately. It was the face of someone waking up from a long nightmare, only to find themselves in another one. Slowly, he raised his hands. "Hey, it's okay," he said in a calm voice. "You're safe now." Her eyes snapped back to him. For a long second, there was silence. Then she spoke, her voice smooth but layered with exhaustion. "Who are you?" Her accent was strange, her words carefully spoken, as if she was pulling them from deep memory. Ethan blinked in surprise. She knows English. That was unexpected. He cleared his throat. "Ethan Cross," he answered. "I found you here, in the mine. You were in that prison pod." Her expression tightened at the word prison. Her fingers curled slightly, as if trying to feel the restraints that were no longer there. Then she let out a shaky breath. "How long?" she whispered. Ethan hesitated. "I don't know. This mine was abandoned decades ago. Maybe longer." He glanced at the old control panels along the walls. No one's been here in a long time. The woman's shoulders tensed. She looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers like she wasn't sure if they were real. Then she finally said, "My name is Soraya Valen. I am Elithari." Ethan's eyebrows rose. Elithari. He had never heard that name before, and he had studied plenty of alien species discovered in human space. Whoever she was, her people were either incredibly rare or completely unknown. Soraya closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. "I was taken," she murmured, "captured in battle. They put me here to keep me from escaping." Ethan frowned. "They?" Before he could ask, Soraya's body shuddered, and she suddenly swayed. Ethan moved on instinct, catching her before she collapsed. Easy," he said, steadying her. "You just got out of a centuries-old prison. Take it slow." Her skin was warm, a strange contrast to the cold air of the chamber. Up close, Ethan could see the fine, glowing patterns along her arms, like veins of liquid starlight running beneath her skin. Soraya exhaled, shaking her head. The restraints, they drained my energy. She looked up at him. But you removed them. You freed me. Ethan gave a small shrug. Yeah, well, I have a habit of getting into trouble. For the first time, a faint smile flickered across Soraya's lips. But before Ethan could respond, a sharp beep filled the air. His helmet scanner was going crazy. Ethan's stomach tightened. He tapped the side of his visor, pulling up the data. His heart dropped. Motion detected. Multiple signatures. Closing in fast. Soraya noticed his shift in expression. What is it? Ethan exhaled, standing up. We're not alone. At that moment, the mine shook. A deep metallic rumble echoed through the tunnels, and the dim lights along the walls flared to life, casting eerie shadows along the walls. Hidden machinery, long thought dead, suddenly awoke. Ethan clenched his fists. Looks like someone noticed we messed with the prison. Soraya pushed herself up, her strength slowly returning. The drawl. Ethan shot her a sharp look. Who? Soraya's expression hardened. The ones who put me here. She turned toward the exit of the chamber, her silver eyes glowing in the dim light. And if they have reactivated the mine, it means they are coming. Ethan tightened his grip on his sidearm. He didn't know who the drawl were, but he knew one thing. He wasn't about to let them take her again. With a determined nod, he looked at Soraya. Then let's make sure they regret it. The mine rumbled again, and in the distance, metallic footsteps approached. The fight for survival had just begun. The ground trembled beneath Ethan's boots as the distant sound of metallic footsteps grew louder. The mine was waking up, and something, or someone, was coming straight for them. Soraya stood beside him, her glowing silver eyes fixed on the tunnel ahead. Though she was still weak from her long imprisonment, there was a sharpness in her gaze, a warrior's instinct, ready to fight. Ethan checked his sidearm. It was just a standard pulse pistol, not much against advanced enemies, but better than nothing. He glanced at Soraya. Can you fight? She flexed her fingers, a faint shimmer running along her skin. Then she frowned. My energy is low. The restraints drained too much. Ethan cursed under his breath. Then we need to get out of here, fast. The chamber lights flickered as the footsteps grew closer. A sharp metallic screech echoed through the tunnel, sending a chill down Ethan's spine. Whatever was coming wasn't human. Soraya tensed. Drell sentinels, she whispered. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. Are they killable? Soraya hesitated. Not easily. That wasn't the answer he wanted. A second later, they arrived. 3 towering figures stepped into the chamber. Tall, skeletal machines with dark, metallic armor and glowing red eyes. Their limbs were long and clawed, their movements unnervingly smooth. Ethan had seen plenty of combat drones before, but these things were different, smarter. One of them tilted its head slightly, scanning the room before its gaze locked onto Soraya. A deep mechanical voice rumbled from its core. Prereizozoni are lo-c-a-t-ed. Initiating R-E-C-O-N-T-A-I-N-N-E-N-T. Then, in perfect unison, all 3 machines charge. Ethan reacted instantly. He fired his pulse pistol, sending a bright blue energy blast toward the nearest machine. The shot hit dead center, and did absolutely nothing. The machine barely flinched before lunging forward. Ethan cursed and dove aside just as the machine's claws sliced through the air where he had been standing. The impact sent sparks flying as the metal floor cracked beneath its strength. Not good, he yelled. Soraya moved with surprising speed, despite her weakened state. As the second machine lunged at her, she raised her hands, and a faint silver energy pulse flickered around her fingertips. She thrust her palm forward, and the air shimmered. But the energy flickered and died out before it could fully form. Her eyes widened in shock. No. The Drell sentinel took advantage of her hesitation. With lightning speed, it swung its arm forward, knocking Soraya hard against the chamber wall. She let out a sharp gasp as she hit the ground. Ethan's blood ran cold. Soraya. The third machine turned its attention to him, lunging. Ethan had no time to think. He reached for his belt, grabbed the explosive charge he always carried for mining operations, and threw it toward the incoming machine. Boom! The explosion ripped through the air, shaking the entire chamber. Smoke and dust filled the room as pieces of metal scattered in all directions. Ethan coughed, his ears ringing. As the smoke cleared, he saw the third machine lying in pieces, its torso blasted open, sparks flickering from within. "Ha! Guess you're not so tough after all," he muttered. But his victory was short-lived. The other two machines were still standing, and now they were angry. Ethan barely had time to react before the first machine grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off the ground. Pain shot through his neck as the metal fingers tightened. His vision blurred. He struggled, kicking at the machine's chest, but it was too strong. The second machine stepped toward Soraya, raising its clawed hand, preparing for the final strike. Ethan fought to breathe, his vision going dark at the edges. This was it. Then, suddenly, everything changed. A deep hum filled the chamber. The air around them grew heavy with energy. The drill machines froze. Ethan felt the pressure around his neck vanish as the machine holding him suddenly staggered back, its red eyes flickering in confusion. Soraya's body was surrounded by a glowing silver aura. Her eyes snapped open, now blazing with pure energy. The patterns along her skin pulsed, growing brighter with each passing second. The air crackled with power. The drill machine in front of her took a cautious step back. Soraya's voice rang out, strong and unyielding. "I am no longer your prisoner." She raised her hand, and this time, when she released her energy, it didn't flicker or die out. It roared. A shockwave of pure silver light burst from her fingertips, slamming into the machine with incredible force. The drill sentinel screamed, its metal frame twisting and shattering as the energy ripped through it. Ethan barely had time to process what had happened before Soraya turned to the remaining machine. With a simple flick of her wrist, another blast of energy sent it flying across the room, where it crashed into the wall and collapsed into a heap of smoking metal. Silence fell over the chamber. Ethan lay on the ground, coughing and trying to catch his breath. Slowly, he pushed himself up and looked at Soraya. She stood tall, her energy still glowing, her silver eyes filled with quiet determination. Ethan let out a small laugh. "Remind me never to make you mad." Soraya turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "Are you hurt?" He rubbed his neck. "Nothing a good drink won't fix." Soraya's energy slowly faded, her glow dimming as she took a deep breath. "We need to leave," she said. "Now." Ethan nodded. "Agreed. But I have a feeling this isn't over." Soraya's expression darkened. "No, the drawl will not stop." She looked toward the tunnel exit. "And if they know I am free, they will come for me." Ethan holstered his pistol. "Then we better make sure they never catch you again." Together, they turned toward the exit, ready to face whatever came next. The fight was far from over. The air inside the mine was thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself as he looked at the remains of the drawl machines. Their shattered bodies sparked and flickered, but he knew it was only a temporary victory. Soraya, still glowing faintly, exhaled and turned to him. "We cannot stay here. The drawl will send more." Ethan nodded, gripping his pulse pistol. "Then let's get out before they arrive." The mine was a maze of old tunnels and collapsed passageways, but Ethan had spent enough time exploring it to have a general sense of direction. The main exit wasn't too far, but with the mine systems coming back to life, there was no telling what traps or dangers lay ahead. Soraya followed close behind as they moved swiftly through the narrow tunnels. Her steps were light, and despite her recent battle, she seemed to be regaining strength. "Are you feeling any better?" Ethan asked as they ducked under a rusted support beam. Soraya hesitated. My energy is still low, but returning. She looked at her glowing hands, clenching them into fists. The restraints drained me for too long. Ethan frowned. How did you even end up here? Soraya's expression darkened. The Drawl captured me in battle. They feared my abilities, so they placed me in stasis, hidden away where no one would find me. She looked around at the mine's walls. This place, it was never meant to be a prison. It is a tomb. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had assumed the mine was just an abandoned human operation, but if Soraya was right, then this place had a far darker history. Before he could respond, the tunnel suddenly rumbled. A deep mechanical growl echoed through the passage ahead. Ethan froze, holding out a hand to stop Soraya. Wait. From the shadows, something moved. A new Drawl machine stepped forward, larger than the sentinels they had fought earlier. Its dark metal body pulsed with red energy, and its 4 glowing eyes locked onto them with a predatory focus. Ethan tensed. That one looks different. Soraya narrowed her eyes. It is a hunter. Stronger. Faster. The hunter's body shifted, and long, bladed arms extended from its sides. Ethan gulped. Great. Without warning, the hunter lunged. Ethan barely had time to react before the machine swung its blade at him. He dove to the side, rolling just as the blade slammed into the ground, sending sparks flying. Soraya moved with lightning speed, raising her hands. A burst of silver energy shot toward the hunter, striking its chest. But unlike the previous machines, this one absorbed the energy, its red glow intensifying. Soraya's eyes widened. It is adapting. Ethan cursed. Of course it is. The hunter turned its attention to Soraya and rushed at her. She barely dodged as the machine's blade sliced through the air where she had been standing. The force of the attack sent a shockwave through the tunnel, making the walls tremble. Ethan knew they couldn't fight this thing head-on. They needed another way. His eyes darted around the tunnel, searching. Then he spotted it. A cluster of unstable mining explosives stacked against a support beam. A risky plan formed in his mind. Soraya, he shouted, we need to bring the ceiling down. She followed his gaze and understood immediately. With a nod, she raised her hands, gathering the last of her strength. A bright pulse of silver energy formed between her palms. The hunter, sensing the threat, charged at her again. Ethan fired his pulse pistol, aiming at the explosives. The first few shots bounced off the metal casings, but then a chain reaction erupted, sending shockwaves through the tunnel. Soraya released her energy at the same moment, directing the force toward the weakened ceiling. The rocks cracked, then collapsed. The hunter let out a mechanical screech as tons of debris rained down, crushing it beneath an avalanche of stone and metal. The dust filled the tunnel, making it hard to see. Ethan coughed, waving his hand in front of his face. Did it work? As the dust settled, he saw no sign of the hunter, only a pile of rubble where it had stood. Soraya exhaled, staggering slightly. It is gone. Ethan reached out, steadying her. You okay? She nodded weakly. Just tired. He gave her a small smile. Then let's get out of here before more show up. With the hunter defeated and the mine collapsing behind them, Ethan and Soraya pushed forward, toward the exit, toward the unknown. Whatever lay ahead, one thing was certain. The fight was far from over. The tunnel behind them was collapsing, the sound of falling rocks echoing through the mine. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see. Ethan and Soraya ran forward, their footsteps echoing as they navigated the twisting passageways. We're almost there, Ethan shouted, his voice barely audible over the rumbling behind them. Soraya was breathing heavily, her energy nearly drained after the battle with the Drawl machines. She stumbled slightly, but Ethan caught her arm, helping her stay on her feet. Don't slow down now, he urged. Soraya nodded, her silver eyes flickering with determination. I won't. The tunnel finally widened, revealing a large metal door up ahead. It was old and rusted, but still intact. "That leads outside," Ethan pointed. "Come on." They reached the door, and Ethan slammed his hand against the control panel. The ancient system groaned, struggling to function after years of neglect. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a mechanical screech rang out behind them. Ethan turned, his heart pounding. From the rubble of the collapsed tunnel, something moved. His stomach twisted. No way. The hunter wasn't dead. The machine emerged from the dust, its glowing red eyes burning brighter than before. Its body was damaged, metal plating bent and torn, but it was still standing. And it was angry. The hunter took a step forward, its bladed arms extending once more. Sparks flew from its joints, but it continued to advance, its movements unnaturally smooth despite the damage. Ethan pounded on the control panel again. Open, open, open. The hunter charged. Soraya raised her hands, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in her face. She was too weak to fight again. The door hissed as it finally started to open. "Go." Ethan grabbed Soraya's arm and pulled her through the narrow gap just as the hunter lunged. Clang. The door slammed shut, trapping the machine inside the mine. Ethan and Soraya stumbled forward into the open air. For the first time in hours, Ethan breathed in fresh air. The cool night breeze hit his face, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant trees. They were finally outside. Ethan bent over, catching his breath. That was close. Soraya stood beside him, her silver eyes scanning the landscape. They were standing in a wide canyon, surrounded by towering rock formations. The mine entrance was carved into the side of a cliff, barely visible against the dark stone. "We need to move," she said softly. Ethan glanced at her, noting the exhaustion in her face. "You need rest." She shook her head. "The drawl will not stop. That machine. It sent a signal before we collapsed the tunnel." Ethan's blood ran cold. "You're saying?" "They know I am free," Soraya confirmed. "More will come." Ethan cursed under his breath. They had escaped the mine, but the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. He looked up at the night sky. The stars stretched endlessly above them, twinkling against the darkness. Somewhere out there, the drill forces were already on their way. Ethan clenched his fists. If they wanted Soraya back, they'd have to go through him first. The cold night wind swept through the canyon as Ethan and Soraya stood outside the abandoned mine. The distant hoot of a nightbird was the only sound besides their own breathing. Above them, the stars stretched endlessly across the sky, but there was no time to admire the view. Ethan turned to Soraya. "We can't stay here. You said the drawl would come." Soraya nodded, her silver eyes scanning the rocky terrain. "They will send ships, hunters. They will not stop until I am recaptured, or dead." Ethan frowned. "Not happening." Soraya glanced at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. "You do not even know me," she said softly. Ethan gave her a half-smile. "I know enough. You didn't deserve what they did to you, and I don't leave people behind." For a moment, Soraya just looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "We should move." Ethan took the lead, guiding them along the canyon wall. He had explored these parts before. There was an old supply station hidden a few miles away, left behind when the mining operations shut down. If they could reach it, they might find a ship or at least some supplies. But something was bothering him. The drawl were a ruthless, advanced species. If they had gone through the trouble of imprisoning Soraya for so long, she had to be very important. He glanced at her. "Soraya, what exactly are you?" She hesitated. "I am the last of my kind." Ethan's steps slowed. "The last." Soraya sighed, looking up at the sky. "My people, the Velari, were once warriors. We fought the Drow for centuries. They feared us because of our abilities." She lifted her hand, and for a brief moment, A faint silver light flickered between her fingers. But the war was long. The Droll were stronger, more relentless. One by one, my people fell. Until only I remained. Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. And they locked you away instead of killing you. Soraya's expression darkened. They wanted to study me, to break me. Ethan clenched his fists. Well, they failed. Soraya looked at him again, and this time there was something different in her gaze, something grateful. Before either of them could say another word, a low hum filled the air. Ethan froze. Do you hear that? Soraya's eyes widened. A ship. They both turned to the sky just as a dark, triangular shape appeared over the canyon, blocking out the stars. Ethan's heart pounded. They're already here. The Droll ship hovered above them, its sleek black surface almost blending into the night. Then, a bright red light scanned the canyon. They're searching for us, Soraya whispered. Ethan grabbed her wrist. Run. They took off, sprinting along the canyon floor. The moment they moved, the red light locked onto them. A sharp, metallic voice echoed from the ship. Target acquired. Ethan cursed. Not good. The ship fired a pulse blast, and the ground exploded behind them. Rocks and dust flew into the air, nearly knocking Ethan off his feet. We need cover, Soraya shouted. Ethan spotted an opening in the canyon wall, a narrow passage barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. There, he pointed. They dove inside just as another blast hit the ground where they had been standing. The canyon shook, but the passage was too tight for the ship to follow. Ethan and Soraya pressed themselves against the rock, breathing hard. The ship hovered outside for a few moments, scanning. Then, to Ethan's relief, it moved away, continuing its search elsewhere. Soraya exhaled. That was close. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead. Too close. They couldn't keep running forever. They needed a plan. Soraya turned to him. You said there was a supply station nearby. Ethan nodded. If we can get there, we might find a way off this planet. Soraya's silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Then let's go. With the Droll searching for them and danger at every turn, they had only one choice. Keep moving or be caught. And Ethan wasn't about to let that happen. Ethan and Soraya moved carefully through the rocky passage, their footsteps silent against the uneven ground. The Droll ship was still searching above, its dark silhouette drifting through the night sky, like a predator hunting its prey. Ethan glanced at Soraya. How far is your energy from returning? Soraya shook her head. I am still weak. If I push myself too hard, I may collapse. Ethan frowned. That wasn't good. They needed a way to fight back or escape, and right now, they had neither. Then, finally, the supply station came into view. The small outpost was built into the side of the canyon, its metal doors rusted from years of abandonment. A few broken antennas stuck out from the roof, and an old landing pad extended from the base. Ethan's heart lifted. If there's a working ship in there, we might just have a chance. Soraya followed him as he rushed to the door. He wiped the dust off the control panel and pressed a button. Nothing happened. Come on, don't do this to me, Ethan muttered. He tried again. The screen flickered. Then, beep. The door hissed open, revealing the dark interior. They stepped inside cautiously. The air smelled stale, and dust coated the floor. Old crates and broken equipment were scattered everywhere. Ethan scanned the room. There has to be something useful here. Soraya's gaze fell on the far side of the station, where a small ship rested beneath a protective tarp. The vessel was old, but it looked intact. There, she pointed. Ethan's face lit up. If that thing still flies, we're getting off this planet. They hurried toward it, but before they could reach the ship, a metallic voice echoed through the station. Tar GT's LOCATED. Ethan's blood ran cold. He turned and saw two Droll hunters standing at the entrance, their glowing red eyes locked onto them. Behind them, The Drell ship hovered just outside, its weapons charging. Soraya clenched her fists, trying to summon her energy, but she stumbled. Ethan caught her before she could fall. "Stay behind me," he said. The Drell hunters moved in, their bladed arms gleaming under the station's dim lights. Ethan had one pulse pistol and very little cover. This wasn't a fight he could win. But he didn't need to win. He just needed to buy time. He lifted his pistol and fired. Pew! Pew! The shot struck one of the hunters, but its armor absorbed the damage. The machine barely flinched as it advanced. "Of course," Ethan muttered. "Why would it ever be easy?" The second hunter lunged. Ethan dove aside just as a blade slammed into the floor where he had been standing. Sparks flew, and the force of the impact shook the entire station. Soraya struggled to rise, her silver eyes flickering weakly. Ethan needed an idea. Fast. Then he saw it. A fuel line connected to the ship. A risky plan formed in his mind. "Soraya, can you give me just a little power?" he asked. She looked at him, confused but trusting. With great effort, she raised her hand and released a small pulse of silver energy. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ethan caught the energy in his palm, then threw it at the fuel line. The moment it hit, boom! The explosion ripped through the station, sending flames and debris flying. The force threw the Drell hunters back, their metal bodies crashing against the walls. The ship rocked, but it was still intact. Ethan grabbed Soraya and pulled her toward the cockpit. "Let's go." They scrambled inside as alarms blared throughout the station. Ethan jumped into the pilot's seat and pressed every button he could find. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the ship roared to life. The controls lit up, and the engines hummed with power. Outside, the Drell ship was recovering, its weapons aimed at them, preparing to fire. Ethan gritted his teeth. Not today. He punched the thrusters. Viewership. The ship blasted out of the station, speeding through the canyon at breakneck speed. The Drell ship fired, but the blasts missed, hitting the rocks instead. Ethan gripped the controls. Come on, come on. The ship climbed higher, breaking free from the canyon and racing toward the sky. The Drell ship chased after them, moving fast. Soraya, still weak, placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Trust me." Ethan glanced at her. "What are you?" Then, suddenly, her eyes glowed brighter than ever before. She placed her other hand on the ship's controls, and a surge of silver energy flowed through the systems. The ship lurched forward, moving at impossible speed. The Drell ship tried to follow. But Soraya raised her hand, and a final burst of energy disrupted their engines. The Drell ship spun out of control, crashing toward the planet below. Ethan's eyes widened. "Did you just?" Soraya exhaled, her energy fading again. "I told you, I am the last of the Valeri." Ethan grinned. "Remind me to never make you angry." The ship broke through the planet's atmosphere, entering the cold void of space. Ethan finally relaxed, his hand still gripping the controls. "We made it." Soraya looked at him, a small smile on her lips. "For now." Ethan smirked. "Well, I don't know about you, but I could use a break." Soraya chuckled softly. "Perhaps, but something tells me our journey is just beginning." As they drifted into the vast unknown, the stars stretched before them, endless and full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt truly alive.